As a reminder, we'll be recording this meetup and posting this to meetup.com during the meetup. So if you have any comments you'd like to make or chat with other participants, you can use the chat panel in the webinar. But if you have any questions you'd like to submit for us to answer, please use the Q&A panel, which you also see down near the chat button on there. So with that said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Walt and Lindsay to start the webinar.
Very good. Thanks, Matt. I hope you guys can hear me okay. Appreciate the time you guys give us today. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the emergency management solutions. Just going to give a level set here to start off with about some of the solutions that are available to you. And then we'll demonstrate to you how you can use those solutions to maintain situation awareness, keep the public informed, conduct initial damage assessment. Then we'll take some questions, and at the end we'll talk a little bit about the road ahead. So let's get started. First, I want to talk a little bit about some of the evolving demands on emergency management in the last few years. It seems like it's no longer just about responding to natural disasters, but now emergency management agencies are responsible for managing the impact of those incidents or events on both the man-made and natural disasters to the public and to the citizens that are around there. So there's a lot more responsibility. It's no longer just about informing the public about what's happening, but managing it. ArcGIS Solutions for emergency management help meet those needs of emergency managers. You can think of these business needs in 4, sometimes 5 different phases. So over here, I'm going to start off with the preparedness phase. First thing you need to do is plan ahead, kind of do some training, maybe do some partnership building with mutual aid agreements or whatever in getting ready for a planned or a potential event. In the response phase of an event, protection of life and property, stabilizing the incident, telling people when they need to evacuate, where they need to go and get shelter, and so on. Over in recovery, it's helping people, finding houses where they can go, managing the debris, helping people recover from different types of events and getting the community back together again. And in mitigation, it's about hazard assessment. How do you identify where the vulnerabilities are? How do you program and build for infrastructure, and educate the public a little bit to avoid or at least minimize the impact of those disasters on future events. So that's kind of how we are thinking about aligning our development effort to meet those phases and the business needs of emergency managers. Some of the challenges that we have heard in the last several years regarding managing events and so on are, how do I remain in a constant state of preparedness? How do I know what's coming? That's a big thing. We can watch stream gauges as we see lately, but still there are some things that catch us off guard, and how can we be ready for them when they come? The second one I hear a lot about is understanding what and who's going to get impacted by an incident. This really gets to how big is it, how bad is it going to be? And then the third one is, how do I apply limited resources effectively? So if I have a volunteer fire department, for example, and we have an evacuation order, we go out and knock on doors, we need to know exactly which doors to knock on, because we don't have very many resources. We have a limited amount. And then how do we monitor the activities during the event? Quite often we hear that you'll have multiple incidents within an event. So within a flood event, you have a traffic incident, bridge is out, dams break, etc. And you need to know, how do I manage that information that's coming in? What do I need to know, and what do I need to do with that information? And then also about conducting rapid damage assessments and ensuring the community can recover effectively. I think I just read this morning that from the recent flooding here in the Midwest, that Nebraska alone is going to top over $1 billion in damage from the flood. And so how did they get those numbers quickly for each one of those counties? I think there were 77 counties that were declaring emergencies. And then how can we communicate with the public effectively for telling them what they need to know? So those are some common challenges that we hear quite a bit. So with emergency management operations, we try to help these agencies meet those challenges by leveraging locational information in these applications. So you can think of it over here on the left side, this operational data. You have different kinds of incidents. We have incidents that come in all the time. Some of them are longer lasting incidents and some are short term. We have some resources that we can apply. We need to know where those resources are, where our critical facilities are, and a little bit about the demographics about what people are going to be affected in our communities. All that information then can be fed into your portal. and then be distributed out through multiple applications that are designed to meet the needs of those different audiences and the different stages they've talked about a minute ago. So for example, if the GIS analyst gets some new flood inundation data, the operations staff should be able to see that information and be able to respond to that and know what they need to do with it. Or if field workers are out collecting damage assessments, the incident commander should be able to see those damage assessments as they're coming in through the incident status dashboard or in the briefing. So that just gives you an example of how that information then can be shared. So we have several different applications that make up the emergency management operations. And let's just go through these first, and then we'll get into a little bit of showing you how they work. First one on the list there is the Situational Awareness Viewer. It can be used to help understand the impact of an incident on the public infrastructure or the human populations, the size up, if you will. The operations response can be used to manage incident response activities, knowing where your responders are, where they need to go, what resources are available, and so on. In the incident status dashboard, can be used in the EOC or Emergency Operations Center when it's activated to help incident commanders measure the progress of incident objectives. And then the fourth one there, incident briefing, can be used by incident command staff to brief key stakeholders during the event or the incident, which can be done on a periodic basis, such as daily or something like that. It provides up-to-date current information as the incident unfolds. And then public information can be used to provide authoritative information on the current status to the general public. And again, the benefit of having that is that you have live information coming in that you can share with the public, like where they can go get shelter and so on. And then we have damage assessment dashboard and some surveys. You may see that we've made quite a few changes in some of these applications over the last 6 months. We're going to show you some of those changes today. But one of them is we have these surveys that can be used to collect that information, which feeds right into the damage assessment dashboard. And it can be used to monitor how those initial damage assessments are and determine whether the costs exceed the state or federal thresholds. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what these solutions are. What I'm going to do now is jump into my application here and just show you a little bit about some of these applications so you get an idea. We'll start off with what we call the Common Operational Picture. And a Common Operational Picture is a good way to share or help users maintain that situation awareness. And the Common Operational Picture is sort of like a suite of applications that share the same operational locational information to the different groups and the different stages. So if we start off with like the situation awareness here, you can see that there's been a few changes to it. But it basically has two main functions. One, we want to be able to allow users, like a duty watch officer, for example, to be able to define the hazard or incident area. And you can see that we have several different active warnings and incidents on the list here. And then we also want to be able to identify people and places that are going to be impacted within those incident areas. So let's take a look at it. So I have a list of them here. I've got this one here, the incident that already exists. It's a flood warning maybe I got in from the Weather Service or so on. If I just click on it, it gives me information about the incident number. Maybe I've given it a name and when it occurred and so on. I can just go down here and click on this More button and set the location of it. And it's going to automatically use the situation awareness widget, which sets the buffer default distance for 1 mile. So I can change that if I want to. But the idea here is to be able to give me just a quick overview of what's included in that 1 mile buffer. So if I click on these tabs here, I can see here's the potential impact. And we've broken it down here into total population and some of the more vulnerable populations, such as children under 5 or children or adults over 85, I should say. So it gives you some idea about what's the size of people going to be impacted. How many schools, how many students are going to get impacted by this thing? If there's shelters available, what's the total capacity of those shelters within that impact area? Number of beds available, what's the current occupancy, and so on. We can find out hospitals that might be impacted by that, get the information from them, give them a call and tell them, and give them a warning of what might be coming. And if we have some road closures already in effect, like we have pre-existing projects, public projects or something like that, we might want to be aware of that kind of stuff. So this gives you an idea of some of the information that can be used during the initial size up to find out what's the impact of this particular incident. And as you can see on the list, I have other kinds of incidents as well that we can pick on. So I have here Baltimore flooding. If I click on that one, I can do the same thing. Or I have a public health thing and so on. And we also have National Service, Weather Service, warnings, watches, so it reads the live service in here so you can see what's going on. We have a flood watch in effect right now. So there's some information about what the user can interact with, what they can be presented with when they first come into the situational awareness viewer. So what else can you do with it? Well, I might want to be able to do some other things. So what I can do is I'm going to click on the Start Over button and just go in here and show you some other things that you can do with it. First of all, I can locate an incident in 3 ways. I can draw a point. So perhaps I can just drop a point right over here somewhere, let's say at this intersection. And I can say, okay, I have an incident that's occurring here. And if I want to, then I can go over here to the right and I can see I could save that incident if I want to. It'll present me with an input screen, or I can go in here and select out the incident number and name. If I want to, I can also pick from a list of different types of incidents. So if I wanted to, I can come down here and say, all right, well, we have a vehicle incident, we have a traffic incident or something like that. Then I can set that as my location. Now I can get some information on this new incident that has occurred. Again, go back over and check on the potential impact within this 1 mile buffer, how many schools and shelters, whatever I want to in there. Once I've done that, then I can, if I wanted to, I could just hit this report button and generate a report about what's going to be included within that 1 mile buffer of that particular incident. And you have a number of options, landscape or portrait, different ways that you can print out a report. And you can see here that it's pulling from all that information that you saw on the screen there, such as the total population, the breakdown, the number of schools, and all the attributes that I want to have included in those schools. If I scroll down here the list, you can see I have shelters, number of information on contact information and current occupancy and so on. So if I wanted to, I could print this out and give it to somebody else so that they could take action on if necessary. Some other things you might want to do is I might want to download that information. So if, for example, I have information on shelters, let's just use that one, and I'll open up that. So you can see there's a CSV file gets created for each one of these layers. And if I needed to, I could share that information with somebody that needs to contact those shelters and give them a heads up, let them know that we may have people coming over to them so we can give them some notice. So there's a number of things then you can do with the situation awareness viewer. And another one I should mention to you is as incidents change over time, you might want to be able to create a snapshot. Now, snapshot just could be, what's happening at this moment in time, such as this traffic incident, let's call it. And I'm just going to save that off. And what that does is grabs everything in that impact area, including all of those layers that we have, and it creates a snapshot so I can use that information later. So then I can click on that snapshot and it takes me to my portal, tells me here's all the information that was captured in that snapshot so I can take a look at the buffer, the initial buffer, and what the incident was, what hospitals and so on. Now, as time changes, I can take another snapshot. It'll put a timestamp on that snapshot as well and show me what things I may need to be aware of or what happened. And this could be very useful for an after-action report or for using it later on in the incident. So we'll get back to our incident here. And another thing you should probably know is sometimes, the incident might be over or we don't need to deal with it anymore, so we'll just hit delete. And so that incident is done and we can move on to the next thing. So that kind of gives you an idea, high-level overview of what's possible in the situation awareness viewer. But as I said before, you want to be able to share that locational information with the different groups in the Emergency Operations Center that are responsible. The next one would be the operations section. They also have an app that looks very similar to the one we just looked at in the situation awareness, but it has also 2 main functions, slightly different. It's for the operations section, of course, and it's used to plan the response operations by finding closest facilities to a given location or locate mission teams that have been assigned to response activities. So they can kind of keep track of what's going on and give it guidance on the situation. So they're basically the same thing. We can click on that particular incident here. Hopefully we'll click on it. And then we want to, oops, let's go back here. We want to be able to click on that incident and say, okay, I know about this incident, the situation awareness viewer, the duty watch officer, whoever it was, informed me of this particular incident. Now I want to be able to take action on that as well. So I'll do basically the same thing as they did. I'll set the location for that. And the difference is I get new information down at the bottom that the situation awareness viewer did not provide. As operations chief or section, I want to know what mission ready packages. In this case, you can see we have a hazmat team that's already been deployed to a particular incident here. we might want to know some things like, well, what kind of facilities that could be impacted within this particular incident area. So we get a list of those. We might get some list of road closures that are already in effect, some hospitals where we need to transport people to them, of course, what schools are going to be impacted. And notice this time, instead of just giving us a summary, it's providing actual information on the number of students and the address for each of the schools. So you can configure this however you need to, but it gives us some idea about the incident. And of course, I have the same capabilities as you saw earlier, but I've got some new capabilities that I didn't have in the previous one. And one of them, namely, is I want to be able to add resources. So as I'm zoomed out here at this level, you can see on the list here, I have the ability to be able to add incidents, perimeters, an area around an incident, maybe a path. So for example, if I have an incident path here, I might be able to select it and say, okay, we're going to draw in an incident here, and we'll say that this particular incident is a tornado path, maybe. I could provide the incident time and all that detail in here as I want to fill all of this out. By default, it's going to say that this incident is open, it is an active incident, and I would save that. So now I have an incident. In this case, I've used an incident path to add to the map, and you can see it on the screen there. If I scroll down here, you can see I have a list of other types of local incidents. So that I might need to, if there's a chemical spill, for example, I can locate that, maybe with a tornado hit save on that one with all the other information. It'll save that. So now I have a couple of different incidents that have happened during this flood event. So if I clear that, now you can see that there's a list of them on the screen there. They're showing where I put them. But I might want to do some other things. So if I zoom in here a little bit, so you can see some other features will show up as I zoom in. They're set to the scale thresholds. And I'm just going to go through the list. You can see I can add some things like response facilities, or maybe point to distribution if I need to get information out, or if I have these MRPs or mission ready packages, these teams that have been pre-qualified, trained to conduct certain measures, I'll deploy those and locate them on the map if I want to add some more shelters, roadblocks, and so on. So I could do all that, and you'll see the list here is provided for you. So each one of these has a feature template that you can add to your map. So if you needed to, you could locate where there might be perhaps an EMS team located there, and save that location. So that's an additional functionality in the operations response, how they can locate where their resources are, where they want them to go. A couple other things you might want to be able to do with them is I might want to give them directions. If they're a team that, let's say it's a mutual aid, for example, and they're not familiar with the area, I can come over here, click on that particular location, and again, set the more button and say, okay, I want to get them directions from here, and perhaps I want to send them down to this hospital down here. So I'll click on the hospital, and it gives me a route that I can provide to them as I want to. So I can print that off as a report or save it and so on. So I'll clear that off. One of the other things we heard that I think is pretty important for people to know about is, okay, so now an incident has happened, we've responded to it, it's over. What do I do with that information? Because you can see that they can get a lot of incidents on the map. So what we've added in the recent release is to be able to archive these incidents. And so I can see here a list of layers that I can archive. And I'm going to just scroll over here and grab a couple of those incidents that we have earlier. And you notice it brings up with a field called the active incident. And by default, it's set to yes. What I'm going to do is save that to no and say, yes, I think this is no longer an active incident. So now it's cleared from the screen. So that incident is still in the feature class, but it's cleared. So we don't have to look at that one anymore. A couple other things on the screen so you can see what you can do with it. Of course, you can turn your layers on and off if you don't want to see all the schools or shelters or something like that. And of course, you can let the people know about what type of incidents so they can see that the symbology has already been created for you. So this comes with this solution as well. And then lastly, we have a little information about how to use this particular application. So for users that are new to it. So that's a little overview of the operations response. The incident status dashboard can also be used. It collects, if you think of it, all that information that's been gathered from Situation Awareness Viewer and from the operation response, and it allows the incident command in the EOC to be able to monitor what's happening during the incident. So typically, this dashboard would be projected up on the big screen, It's what we call a passive dashboard. It's not interactive. It's just reflecting back what's happening through the other apps. All that locational information is coming to life inside this dashboard. So we can see here we have a couple of active incidents. We have some weather warnings. We can also see how many MRPs or mission-ready packages have been deployed, what that changes, the trend over the last 24 hours, how many road closures, points of distributions that have been opened up, and the current state of our shelters. Again, you could configure this as you need to, but this is how it comes when you deploy it. So there, it's a pretty simple dashboard, but it provides a lot of information. One of the things that's important for you to do here is understand is what is the critical information that Incident Command needs to have up on a big screen all the time. And then one more we have is what we call the incident briefing. And incident briefing is intended to be an interactive app. Again, its purpose is to brief key stakeholders on what's currently happening in the incident. And so you can see here when you open up the incident briefing, on the left side, you get a little bit of introduction. If I click on the situational awareness tab, it just goes to that situation awareness application and gives me live updates. So it's going to go back and read. So if anybody's made any changes to it, we'll see those changes, and allows me to go in and do some what ifing. So what if we do a 2-mile buffer around this flooded area? How's that going to impact it? What shelters are going to be impacted, and so on. So it allows you to interact so that you can answer questions during the briefing to your staff. So I'm just going to click on done. Same is true for operations response. We want to know what teams have been deployed, what kind of facilities have been impacted, or we expect to be impacted within the next shift, perhaps. So we have full capabilities here to be able to go in and use the operations response with all the application configuration the way we showed it earlier. I'm going to skip over the damage assessment because Lindsay's going to talk about that here in a few minutes, and then skip on back to the incident status. So as the status changes, you'll be able to see that as well here. So you can imagine that the next morning, day 2 of the event, 0800, we're doing a briefing to the staff, and you want to see, well, what's changed, what's happened, what's the current state. So it allows you to kind of keep up to date, keep on top of the dynamic changes that are happening as the incident unfolds. So that's kind of a high-level overview of some of the applications that can help you maintain situation awareness. Before we go on and I turn it over to Lindsay, I wanted to see if we have any questions, Matt.
Yeah, so there was a question from Adam. It looks like as we did through the chat window, we did answer some of them, but it was around data. So where does the data for layers for maybe potential impact, schools, shelters, et cetera, so where does that come from? And then kind of follow up, is that populated maybe by county? So we did answer, or kind of roughly, that there's some Living Atlas population data that you can tap into.
Right.
Well, I also mentioned something, so what this was federal HIFLD data in case there wasn't available for local, but if you wanted to kind of
I can add on to that. That's a good. That's exactly what I would tend to do as well. Local data is always, well, not always. It's usually better because you know your shelters, you know your schools and which ones are currently open at the time of the event and so on. So local data is better. When, and they may have already answered the question part of that, when you deploy the applications, you get a series of layers. Those get laid down into your portal when you deploy it. And there's a schema. It has to be some kind of schema. So we've used different formats, different input from different people and different organizations to figure out what should be in a shelters layer, for example, contact info, number of beds available, and all that stuff. You can change that through the deployment tool if you want to. But if you use it out of the box and you just load your data into the existing feature class, then you don't have to go back in and rechange the web map or the configuration of the apps. So that's the advantage of that. You, as Matt mentioned, yeah, there are data through the Living Atlas. HIFLD is one of those that you can use. There's several other ones that are out there. There's live data that comes from National Weather Service and some of the other ones as well that you can use if you don't have data. So that gives you some idea what you can use. But we hope that we provide enough sample layers in there so you can see what kind of data would be helpful, what would be useful, and then add yours as necessary. Any other questions, Matt?
Yeah, one just came in from Terry. Can we import, export, and share the symbols and icons with other agencies on their app?
You can, like if you use in ArcGIS Pro, yes, you can import symbols from one layer to another layer just using standard out-of-the-box capabilities in Pro. If you're in ArcGIS Online, you can also select from one of the symbol sets and click on one of those symbols. But as far as sharing it, you'd have to do that from probably Pro or something like that, where you'd share the entire symbol set.
And then
just to add on to that too, is that if you're interested, like for example, all the symbols that you see there are part of the ArcGIS, the public safety style and the government style file. So that's part of Pro. So you can grab that via Pro and pull that down and use that up-to-date style. And we do update that like a couple times a year.
Yeah.
And then those symbols are actually reflected in ArcGIS Online. And so if you go to your symbol picker in the web map, you see public safety listed, you can go ahead and select all those symbols, or under government, we have many of those symbols as well. So they're available both to you in online and ArcGIS Pro.
Thank you, Lindsay. Perfect. Any other questions, Matt?
Let's see, from Sean. So what is the update process for acquiring he says modules and newer modules? So as, I guess, updates as we kind of update these solutions.
Yeah.
That might not have been included in previous downloads or deployments.
Yeah. So if you haven't gotten this, so Lindsay and I, we've been working on these solutions for a while now, and I think in January there was an update. So if you had an update, if you had the solutions prior to that, you might want to go back and look at it, but you can simply just use the deployment tool and deploy the new solutions. But you'd have to look and see what data you have and so on if you want to retain that data. But those new solutions are available on the solution website, and were updated in the January release.
Cool. And there's one more. Does the routing? So when we did like the directions from to maybe from folks out of state. So does that routing consider the road closures that might impact the route?
Yeah, good question. No, it does not. It doesn't. It just uses the regular routing service. So it's not, unless you create your own, it would not. It's not consuming a local one. So if you just add that in as a visual display, it's not going to reroute it for you.
Okay, I think that's all the questions.
All right. Well, I guess we'll move on here, Lindsay. I'll turn it over to you, and you can kind of go over some of the applications we use for informing the public and conducting damage assessments. I will stop sharing so you can share your screen.
Hi, everyone. And so as Walt said, he demonstrated, how emergency management staff need to kind of manage and monitor during a response. Some great applications that help with that. But one of the things too that's also really important as a component of that response is communicating information to the public. So we have a solution called public information here. And as a member of the general public, this application lets me understand kind of the authoritative information based around an event or an incident, and it kind of gives me the most up-to-date information about what's happening at my location or within my community. So if I come into this application and I search for my location or my address, I can see here that I've done a quick buffer around my location, and then on the right-hand panel, I can see that I'm actually within the incident perimeter. So I'm within the kind of flooding area that's currently happening in my community. Can also see that I'm about a quarter mile actually from some localized flooding. And finally, I can see actually I'm under a mandatory evacuation order. And so if I kind of switch from looking at this kind of information on the right-hand side here, and I zoom into the map, and I want to understand that what's really happening around my location here, I can see there's a couple roadblocks. I can see there's a road detour, but I also can see here that there's an evacuation route out. So the first thing I want to do, I'm thinking about, is where's my keys so I can jump in my car and get out. But the second thing I'm thinking about is like, hey, well, what about my family and friends? What are they going to do? So I actually can just go over to the share button here, and when I click share, I'll get a link to this application. And whether I'm on my smartphone, my tablet computer, or my desktop, I can grab this link or use one of the social media buttons here, and I can send that out to my family and friends or my contact lists. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. And now my family and friends are kind of aware of the current situation in our area, and hopefully they can make a decision about whether or not they need to evacuate or make some decisions about what they're going to do in regards to this incident. So this is a public information application, and it's meant for kind of public information officers really to communicate to the general public and make sure they have the most authoritative, up-to-date incident information, whether that's evacuation notices, routes, shelters, incidents, and different areas, things to consider. And so the next thing that's really important, kind of in emergency management, and as we move away from the response is it's almost over, the event has occurred, is we want to start thinking about damage assessment and conducting damage assessments in the community to really understand the severity as well as the magnitude that the event has caused. And so traditionally what we see is a lot of people have paper and pens. So they send the event has occurred, and we want to get out and do that initial damage assessment right away. And so we have volunteers or public officials that go out with a survey, some paper on a clipboard, and they go and do that initial damage assessment. That information comes back into the Emergency Operations Center, and they kind of compile that and try to understand the severity of the damage across the community, as well as the dollar amount of damage and what that's going to cost to kind of get everybody back up and running. But there's got to be a better way, right? And so the damage assessment process using Survey 123 and Operations Dashboard does make this easier. So we've got 3 damage assessment surveys here. And this is, as I said, this is using Survey 123, and I've gone ahead and populated some of this stuff. But the first one you see here is based around public facilities. And so you have things like the incident name, the inspection date. You can go in here and select on a location. So right now this is a public facility, which is the Holocaust Memorial Park. It'll give you the U.S. National Grid coordinate. And we've added some addressing information, and we've said the damage category is it's actually considered a public building. We can describe the damage, and I put some cost estimates in here as well. If possible, if you're using Survey 123 on your phone, you can add a photo. And I put some information about myself as the inspector and determine my affiliation, and I can go ahead and submit that. And so I pre-filled out these other forms. This is for residential buildings and commercial buildings over here on the far side. And these all have very similar questions, but there are some things that are unique to residential properties and commercial properties. So things regarding the insurance, if it's owner occupied or renter occupied, is it habitable? Is it a primary residence? And then also insurance information. So whether the contents are insured via renter or owner, is a structure insured, any sort of additional natural disaster coverage that the person may have purchased, and then information about the deductible and value before damaged. And we've done the same too here for commercial buildings as well. And a lot of the information is similar, but there's also some kind of commercial related stuff here too. I'm going to submit that as well. And really understanding what the impact is the goal. So this is happening actively in the field by many different field inspectors, kind of updating that information. And then here, back at the EOC, I'm looking at a dashboard, and this can be running on the big screen there. And as this information's kind of coming in, we can see the number of destroyed, major, minor damage, or affected properties that are inaccessible, the list of the properties, and kind of that additional information here. And you can see here water streets listed. But the most important number that we're really looking here is the damage assessment. You can see that on all 3 of our tabs that kind of reflect our surveys: residential, commercial, and public facilities. And really what we're trying to get to with this damage assessment number is determining whether our damage costs exceed state or federal thresholds. So if we reach a certain number, we know that we're going to be eligible for state or federal assistance. And this just gives us a better idea of where we really are at in that state of emergency and the resources that we're going to need to recover. And so collectively, that's the damage assessment surveys and dashboard that can help you kind of during that response and recovery phase to get that information. And I also think it's important to kind of mention too is that this is meant for the initial damage assessment, or sometimes it's called the windshield survey assessment. So as soon as the event's done, we go out and do this just to really understand the status that's happening. And this usually precedes the joint preliminary damage assessment, or joint PDA. Yeah, and then so I'm going to open it up for any questions.
Yeah, you have any questions, Matt, on the damage assessment or the public information apps?
For in particular with the damage assessment survey form, so Terry had a couple kind of string of questions. So possible to have digital copies of the survey forms? So I think it may, I'm trying to think of maybe if Terry, if you want to type in like a little, I'm trying to think of what specifically you're getting at there, because those are already digital copies. So are you trying to maybe replicate? Is that what you're asking? And
that's a possibility. That some people have spoke to me about that in the past. Yeah. About they have a particular form that they like to use and they want to convert that to digital. So if that's your question, Terry.
And that was what she was asking. She said
yes. So you can, this survey that Lindsay showed you is what we have, but you can create your own if you wanted to.
And then so she's asking, are they from stock forms on the website, or is that something, like you said, can they import their own type of form into that?
Yeah, so go ahead, Lindsay, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, so when you, I guess when you, in a second here, Walt's going to show how we kind of deploy these. So when you deploy this solution item for damage assessment, you're going to get this exact survey 123 form. But the nice thing is that if you do want to change it and configure it, you can do that. So you could, I guess you could change that form as you kind of to fit that form that you're trying to match, or if it's, I think if it's too different, you could always start from scratch as a configuration of survey 123.
That's right. Yeah.
And then there was a couple kind of follow-up questions associated with the form. So what is the source of the damage dollar? I guess that'd be part of the dashboard. We're showing kind of damage and then the dollar amount associated with that.
Yeah. So if you remember when I was I guess I glazed over a little bit of it, but there's a section that says like kind of estimated cost of damage. That number, as you enter that, the number on the dashboard that you see, that damage estimate, it's kind of adding up. If there's 20 different surveys added, it's kind of the final result. So each one of those surveys, what that's going to equal is that damage assessment. So it's collectively there. So if you had all the damage assessments done for one county, the total of those surveys would all be up in that top corner as the damage estimate. So that's part of what the inspectors are inputting.
And then it looks like 2 or 3 more questions. So from Shelby, so is there any way for the field damage collector to view what structures have already been assessed, so as they move through their assessments?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think there's, you could symbolize it or something like that, or just turn a filter on and say if it's been completed, that it doesn't show up.
So I think, filtering may look there. And then looks like Shauna Ray had a question regarding routing. Does that consume Esri credits?
Yes, yeah. So if it is, so if you can configure it to be used, it does consume Esri credits. And I think there's some information, if you go to our solution site, we kind of have a link there that talks about that and directs you to kind of credit consumption and what that means.
Okay. I'll try to remember to show that, Lindsay, when we get to that point.
Yep.
And then one more from Paul. How do you determine the value of the damage of the building? I guess that's a kind of similar to the I'm assuming, Paul, you're referring to the damage dollar. So it sounds like it's a similar. I guess that he's looking more for like the actual figuring out the value of the damage. He says assessor damage, RS means, things like that.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, Paul. FEMA has a couple of formulas that you can use, and they actually have training and all that you can go through. But you probably want to start with the assessed value of that particular property. One of the things you might notice is that we, in our little example there, we haven't split out between public facilities, commercial, and residential. Those of you that have done this in the past may know that the reimbursement from FEMA comes through two programs. There's the public assistance, and then there's the individual assistance programs. So public assistance is for bridges, water treatment facilities, public buildings, things like that, that are paid through city, county tax dollars and so on to rebuild infrastructure and so on. And then there's the individual assistance program that you can go through your county emergency manager and work through them if you're a victim of loss like that. So there's a couple ways that they will do it. Now, my experience is that it varies across the country how they do that, but I think some guidance is provided by FEMA. I don't have the doc in front of me, but you could take a look and see. But that's a good question. I would start with the assessed value, though. That's the best place, the most recent. Any other questions?
And yeah, one more rolled in right before we switched off. We did the Survey 123 form for this example that we were showing. But is there a way or a mechanism that allows portions of the survey to be copied over from a completed one so the inspector doesn't have to fill out the entire form for every individual assessment?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and Matt, I think, anybody jump in if I think that we do not kind of set any defaults, but I think you can kind of set some defaults in Survey 123. So for example, like if I'm Lindsay and I'm my inspector names there kind of continuously, I think that I can pre-populate that if I use the app.
City, zip code, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And there might be some in Survey 123, there's some inbox function, so maybe there's some kind of loading data. There's some ways to optimize that I think we could do in Survey 123.
It is possible in the Survey 123 app, the mobile app, to save previous information and apply that on future surveys you fill out. So you would fill it out once, kind of save some of the answers and save that as favorites. And then when you fill it out again, that information will be pre-populated in the next survey.
Perfect.
Thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm. Anything else, Matt?
And one more. Were these surveys built in Survey 123 Connect, or do they need to be modified in the web editor?
So we did build them in Survey 123 Connect. Yeah.
Cool.
Good questions. Great. All right. If that's it, then we'll move on to the next set then. So the next question probably is, I'm hoping, is so how do I get started? And basically there are two methods we've outlined. The first one there is the do-it-yourself method, and you can go to the Emergency Management Solutions site. And I'll show you that in a minute. And the other one option is that you can get help. There's an emergency management operations focused industry solution, an offering that you can go to. So let's go to those, and let's see here. I will show you. So the first one on the list then is the solution site. So if there's one thing you want to take away from this is that URL that you see at the top here, solutions.arcgis.com. And then you can scroll down to emergency management. And as I mentioned before, we think of these solutions in these 4 phases. Like I said earlier, you have the preparedness, response, recovery, and the mitigation phases. And so you'll find our solutions in there. If I click on the response, for example, you'll get in here and you can see that maintain situation awareness, and you can produce emergency management maps if you need to. There's a number of different solutions that are available to you here. You can scroll through here and look at the list. I'll just click on learn more for the maintain situation awareness applications. And you can see here's the ones that we showed you earlier, the situation awareness viewer, the common operational picture, operations response, and so on. So here's the incident briefing and some of those other ones. So what you can do then, if I click on learn more, I can go in here to find out about how, if this particular solution is for me, gives me a little overview. If you haven't seen these before, they're very helpful. So again, solutions.arcgis.com, and then just go down to emergency management and start browsing around. It shows you what the requirements are, so you can see where the solution, what's required for it. It'll tell you what you get, and you can see it gets a lot of things here in here. There's the application, there's the web map, the pre-designed feature layers are all listed here for you, so you can see what's in there. If I scroll down, you can see things like the what's new, so you can see what changes have been made for it. We just updated, I think it was yesterday, I think, Lindsay, for the support for 10.7. And these are the changes we put in January. So it said we did quite an update there in January. And so this is a good way for you to find out. If there's things in here that you want, you can take a look at, go to Learn More, scroll down to the What's New page, take a look at some of those things, and then see what you might be interested in. If I keep scrolling down, I want to show you one more thing. If, all right, I want to get started, I can click on that, and it tells me what I need to do. And one of the first things it'll tell you to do is there's an automated deployment method that uses the ArcGIS Solution Deployment Tool. Tells you how you can go and install that add-in. It's an add-in to ArcGIS Pro. Then it tells you how you can use it to deploy the solution, how you can configure the solution. So if you want to add fields, you want to add domains, you want to load data into it, you can do that. And then if you wanted to configure the directions widget. And I think there was a discussion about this earlier. So you can see how it could use service credits right here. So it gives you some information about that. So there's some information in here that I think will be very valuable to you. And then also there is, in some of these applications, at least there's a workflow tab. So it tells you a little bit about what I was just showing you about how you can use these applications in addition to what's in the About widget. You'll click on Find Resources, and you can learn about how you can use the application to find a resource, to locate a new team, or to archive incidents, as I showed you earlier in the demonstration. So this is true that you get to home and you get started for all the solutions. Some of them that have workflow, like the ones I just showed you, they'll have that tab in there, so you can get some more information on that. You could also simply click on the documentation and get to a list of all of the solutions that are available to you. You can see there's a lot of them here for emergency management, and you can get some information from some of the configurable app templates that we use, the automated deployment tool, the ArcGIS deployment tool, and find out what's new with each release. So that gives you an idea of where you can go to get some information for what we call the do-it-yourselfer. And then also, if you need help, you should know that you can get help. So if you go to this page here, you just go to esri.com and go to the industries and select public safety. And inside there, you can click on each one of these tabs over the top. And I have clicked on the solution tab, and it tells me how I can do real-time integrated emergency management and how do I get started. And they'll gather some information from you. They'll contact you and let you know what you can do to get started with it. So if you need help getting data, deploying the applications, or something else, you can look at that. And you'll also see some good stories, some success stories about other agencies, how they're using the solution. So kind of gives you an idea of where you can go to get some help. So with that, I just wanted to show you a little bit about what's coming in the road ahead. We are going to be adding some new solutions as time goes on. And those of you that have been following us for a while, you probably already know that. But one of them that is coming down the road is what we call a daily briefing. It's just an update to what's happening during blue sky operations. So in other words, there is no particular incident today. I just want to know where's staff at, what's happening, all that kind of stuff. So it's a good just to have that every day on my desk. So that's what we call our daily briefing. And we're going to be working on that application later this year. Consolidated public information applications. Lindsay showed you the public information application. So that application we think should be the central resource for emergency managers to be able to communicate authoritative information out to the constituents. And so we'll be including some more capabilities to that application as time goes on. So it's all consolidated into one app. The other one we're going to be working on is ArcGIS Hub. We would like to work on the idea of having a hub site, a place for the public to go to find out what's going on in our community when there is a major incident. What roads are closed? What evacuation orders are in place? Where do I go? How do I get financial help? All that other information. So it's the idea is to have a site, a hub site, for the emergency management organization where they can communicate that out and really create a two-way conversation between them and their constituents and communicate that in a timely and effective way to a large number of people. So we'll be working on that. So if those of you that are interested in participating or something like that, send us a note to the meetup, or you can send it to me at wpotts@esri.com, and I'd be enjoyed having a conversation to you about your needs for that kind of enhanced solution offering. A couple other things. We are working on some Learn lessons. Currently, we're working on this first one on the list here, to implement the common operational picture, as you saw today. So that's a Learn lesson. If you haven't, you can go to learn.arcgis.com. There's a list, a gallery of many different lessons that are available, and this is the one that we are currently working on. I think we'll have this one finished sometime this spring. Then there are some other ones on the list here: gain situational awareness, manage operation response, conduct damage assessment. Those are more at the user end of the applications rather than the implementation from a GIS analyst or a GIS administrator point of view, as the first one is. So those last three, those will probably be a blog or a user story that we will use to communicate how to use those. So it's just more of a digital version instead of a readable workflow like you saw earlier. So those are some ideas about Learn lessons that we are working on as well. I just want to make sure that we have a chance to answer any final questions that may have come up, Matt, before we end our session here. So just wanted to see if there's any other questions that we can clean up.
So looks like there was a question. Looks like Chris answered that. So unless there's any others that folks have, I don't see any new ones that have come in.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to hear all the questions that people have asked, and it's encouraging to know what people are working on. Well, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
So yeah, if there's no other questions from anyone, we really appreciate you attending the meetup today. We look forward to seeing and hearing from you on our next meetup, which is Thursday, April 25th, where we'll be discussing the natural resource and wildlife locators. So until then, have a great afternoon, and thanks for attending.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.